can you hear me? That's okay. No. Jack, can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Can you hear me, Jack? Can you hear me? No, not yet.
Hmm. Yes, I can, Jack. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
The principals at each of the elementary schools, at the 5 elementary schools, and finding out what their classroom makeup is. We talked to a number of them back in June, and then talked again with Melissa Vance just earlier this week. So we have a fairly good understanding of how many classrooms are being used, how the schools are being used right now. So this is just as an example. I'm going to show you 2 different examples. This is Abbott Downing. So we've circled the different how the different classrooms are being used. So you can see in the upper left there are 3 kindergarten classrooms. Those are classrooms that were originally designed as kindergarten classrooms, and they're being used as full-day kindergarten classrooms. There are 3 first grade. Again, we're looking at the left side of the screen, and if you can see that they're the kind of L-shaped area that's called out as first grade, so that's 3 classrooms. The second grade is on the far left at the bottom, three second grades. The third grade is in the middle on the right, again 3 classrooms. The fourth grade is 3 classrooms, an L on the right-hand side, and the fifth grade is 3 classrooms, an L on the left side of the second floor. In addition, the Abbott Downing has 2 classrooms that you see in the upper left, on the first floor, upper left-hand side, that are designated as CRTC. Those are 2 classrooms that are being used by high school students in the Career Tech teacher program. So they're in the school, both doing their practicum and getting instruction right in the elementary school during a portion of the day. So that's two what would have been standard classrooms are dedicated to that. There's a classroom in the middle on the first floor that's designated as a resource, currently designated as a resource room. There's a classroom that you'll see designated, again, on the first floor as a literacy center, and a classroom on the second floor that's indicated as digital learning classroom. So what does this all mean? If you go to the next slide, this helps us understand what the current, in this configuration, with these classrooms being used in this manner, this tells you what the current capacity of the school is if you adhere to this, if you adhere to this layout. So there are, and the students per classroom, and this, the numbers that I've used as students per classroom is within your policy range. It's not at the high end, it's not at the low end, and it's kind of, you know, where you happen to be primarily right now. It seems like a good range to work with. So for instance, with the kindergarten, there are 3 kindergarten classrooms. The goal, say, is 17 per classroom, which would be a total of 51 students. Doing this allows you to get to the 369, which again is the current capacity based on how the school is being used. Now, in 2019, in the 2019-2020 school year, there were 341 students at the Abbott Downing School. And I used 2019-2020 because that's really the last year with really accurate in-school populations. So I think that's a good baseline to work from. And again, we'll wait and see what happens in September and see if that's still an appropriate number to use. But what that's telling us is that there are 300, if every classroom is filled perfectly, you have 369 spaces, and in the past you had a population of 341, which gives you some capacity, some flexibility of up to 28 students. Now, I'm gonna say that and then backtrack just a little bit, because as you add students, you also need to be adding the support spaces and the services to support those students. So you can't just add students and assume that they don't need more support. And B, you never perfectly have the exact number of students that you want at each grade level. So even within a school, you still need some cushion. Within every individual school, you still need a little bit of cushion. But this gives us a process to go through, and then we can question it and dive more deeply into it. This gives us a framework for studying each elementary school. So I'm going to show you, Jack will flip to the next one, just going through the same exercise with the Krista McAuliffe School. And very similar kind of situation where there were 3 kindergartens, 3 designated designed kindergartens in the school. Right now, there's a 4th classroom, and you can see it on the right-hand floor plan, the second floor plan. You'll see the word kindergarten, and then a line going across to, it's actually go down a little bit lower, right there. That's currently being used as a kindergarten classroom. So there are 4 kindergarten classrooms at the Krista McAuliffe. In addition, the room right above that kindergarten classroom is being used for medically fragile children. So you have 2 classrooms here that are not being used as grade level classrooms. They're being used for special reasons. So other than that,
So
you've got
one of the kindergarten classrooms is what you're counting as not being used as a grade
Right, so-
level classroom?
correct. So you have 4 kindergarten classrooms,
Okay.
which means you have, and what that really means is that you have different goals for how many kids are in kindergarten classrooms and how many kids are in the
Yep.
1st through 3. So that's why I differentiate between the kindergarten classrooms and the other classrooms. And in addition, which we can talk about a little bit more later on, the kindergarten classrooms have other parameters. They have other requirements that need to be considered when you're talking just about kindergarten classrooms. But in this school, there are 4 first grade, 4 second grade, 4 third grade, 4 fourth grade, and 2 fifth grade classrooms. So, Jack, you want to flip to the next one? So that gives you, because you have more classrooms, and you actually, you have then at the Abbott Downing, you have a higher capacity, and there were more students. In 2019, there were more students at the Christian McAuliffe than there were at Abbott Downing. But you end up, I think Abbott Downing had 28 extra spaces, and I use that word extra spaces very carefully, potential extra spaces, I guess I should say. And at Abbott Downing, there were 28. But so we did this for all of the elementary schools, and you can see how each one is unique. Each one has its own programs. The Abbott Downing has the high school program. The Christian McAuliffe has the extra kindergarten and the medically fragile children. So every elementary school is different, and it can actually differ from year to year. So if you go to the next one. So this chart is trying to summarize all of that. So the left, really the first 3 numerical columns are a repeat of what you just saw, but it has each elementary school. So starting with the Abbott Downing at the top, Beaver Meadow, Broken Ground, Millbrook, and Christian McAuliffe. Those 3 columns are just what you saw in the previous slide. How many classrooms are available right now, at which age group, based on the student per classroom goals, what do we think the capacity is at each of those schools? And then if you skip over to the column that's labeled population 2019, that again shows you what was the population in each of those schools in 2019. And the next column is the difference between the potential capacity and the population in 2019. And then the final column on the right is the average number of students per classroom. So based on the number of students and the numbers of classrooms available, it's giving you your average. So, and they're all, 4 of the 5 schools are right around 19, which I think is a pretty good place to be. And one school, Beaver Meadow, the way it's currently, and this is all based on the current configurations, it has a slightly lower population of 16.3. But right now in the current configuration, the Beaver Meadow has a 3R program in it, but no other special needs support spaces or medically fragile or any of the other kinds of spaces that you saw at Abbott Downing and Christian McAuliffe set aside from the regulars, using regular classrooms. So what does this all tell you? just to go back, I just want to stay on that for just one more minute. That in theory, you have some excess capacity right now with the 5th grade in there. It's not, especially since that capacity is spread over 5 schools, and particularly because we're in a period where the populations in 20, we're not sure what the student populations will be going forward. And also because Concord does such a great job of providing special services and resources right in the schools, it's really a good place to be. It looks like there's extra capacity, but in fact, you need that flexibility as new students might come up, as new programs come up. So you're really in an okay place for your K through 5 capacity right now. We do want to look at what happens in September and make sure that these numbers hold, that there's not a big jump or that there's not a big drop, that we're still in the same kind of zone as what this is showing. So I would hope to come back to you in September once the numbers settle down and be able to confirm this or perhaps modify it depending on what the reality is. So what does this mean for the middle school? So if you want to click now to, and anytime if there are any questions, if I'm not being clear, just stop me and I can review stuff.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
So do these numbers include the kids who were remote? Are they counted as enrolled at this school, or?
So this is from 2019. So
this is before.
This is before.
Okay,
That's
I'm
why.
sorry.
Yeah. No.
Thank you.
That's a very important question. That's why I use the 2019 numbers, because those are the
Okay,
last
that makes sense.
accurate numbers we have.
Okay.
And that's why it's so important to wait until, I believe that it's so important to wait till September to see if the numbers that were in 2019 are similar to what you're going to be having. I'm assuming you're kind of getting a sense of that now, but I think until school really gets rolling,
Yes.
it'll be hard to say. And given the COVID year, and I think, there were some parents who went more seriously into homeschooling. There's some parents who went more seriously into private schools. Will those parents feel comfortable bringing their children back? I'm not telling you anything you don't already know.
Yeah.
And then there's also this kind of sense of, well, there was some people moving into Concord, that there was some demand for coming into Concord.
Yeah.
So do either of those, either students that at least temporarily left the system, or potentially more students coming in, are those going to have any impact on these numbers? So
Okay.
hopefully September will give us a much better sense of that.
Okay. But the spaces are the current.
The spaces are the
use
current,
spaces.
yeah. And
Okay.
even as students come in, then there might be some sense of, we don't need 4 4th grades. We only need 3
Right.
4th grades. So then these things could shift a little bit.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Laura, Kathleen's asking what is the recommended percentage for building use?
So in a given building, it's great to have that kind of 8 to 10% cushion. When you're looking across a whole system, you'd like to have a little bit more than that, so that you're not having to change district lines constantly. If you're tight, then you're always having to shift district lines and say, oh, well, this school is low this year, but this school is high, so let's move things around. So you're as I said, you're in an okay place with this kind of percentage. But given that it's 5 schools, and given that it's 5 schools, and given that it's, we're at this moment in time with the uncertainty, it just feels that we need to wait a little bit for things to calm down, to make sure that this is going to hold, and to understand better what the implications are for the future. If it was one school that had a 10%, that had that kind of capacity, and then that would be adequate. But when you're spreading it across the 5 schools, then it feels a little bit there's just a certain discomfort level about making big prognoses right now. So then that brings us to the projections that were made, and you have two, as you know, there were two different projections, ones that were done recently, the Nasdaq projections, and ones that were done in 2018, 2019. And I think it's important to understand that these projections had different assumptions built in, or different research that was done to make these projections. The Davis demographics really looked at things like housing starts and what was the housing stock, and what's the age of the community, as older people are moving out or newer families moving in. So it was a much more of a serious demographic study of Concord. Nasdaq tends to be much more of a what's happening in the moment. So given that, I tended to rely a little bit more on the demographic studies. They seem more in line with what's happening now, or what's in the system now. And this just looks at, you have a decision. Is it going to be a 5 through 8 middle school? Is it going to be a 6 through 8 middle school? And if you assume in that one school a 10% capacity, what do you want the new school, what do you want the size of the new school to be? And the reason this is so critical is that when we design the school, we design for a certain population, and you want to make sure that you're building a capacity in for flexibility for the future, if you believe that your school population is going to grow. But you don't want to build in so much extra capacity that you're not being economically wise for the community. So that's the line that's so challenging. So the numbers that we're suggesting, given that, and kind of relying more on the Davis demographic study, would be a 5 through 8 school of approximately 1,250 students, and a 6 through 8 school of 950. And again, we'll revisit these as the September enrollment numbers are solidified, but I think this gives us a sense, at least, of what the capacity at those two different schools' sizes would be. Now, the challenge is, do you make the decision to go through with the 5 through 8, or do you make a decision to stick with the 6 through 8? And I think a big part of that is a decision about, looking to the future. What level of growth do you have, and looking at the universal pre-K. Will universal pre-K be a factor? Because in fact, the universal pre-K students would take the place of the 5th grade in the elementary schools. If you move out the 5th grade, you have approximately the right amount of space for your pre-K students. If you want to go to the next slide. So this is just making some assumptions about, based on your current populations, that you might expect a population of about 400 students. Those students are using are presumably half-day students, and that would require about 14 classrooms. And there's a lot of things about pre-K that are very uncertain. It's very hard to predict. You don't know where the parents want their students to go. You don't know what kind of, do they want 2 mornings a week, 2 afternoons, 3 afternoons, 4 afternoons. So it's very hard to project now with the level of experience that Concord has, exactly what the demand would be. But given other communities, there does appear to be some pretty consistent demand with the number of students per grade level. So if you happen to have 250 kindergarten students, you would have somewhere close to 250 4th graders and about the same number of 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds wanting to attend universal pre-K. So these are all, again, these numbers are very fluid, but just to give you a sense of what we're looking at. And then if you look at the next slide, you do have, as I mentioned before, pre-K classrooms really should have toilets adjacent to them with changing areas, so accessible toilets with changing areas. Just like with the older students, they also come with space. They need to have spaces for their services and for meeting with parents. So you're not just getting you're not just putting students in classrooms, you're also needing to have the services to support those students and their families. And pre-K students need to have access to the out of doors at grade. You don't want the pre-K students having to go upstairs or downstairs in order to egress the building during or go downstairs, I should say, to egress the building during a fire. So they want to be able to have direct access to grade level from their classrooms. So all of those things put some constraints on how the existing building might be used if there was universal pre-K. But even with those constraints, it looks like you have approximately, given your existing pre-K classrooms and your potential classrooms that could be used for pre-K, that you, as I said before, that moving the 5th grade out would allow you to have adequate pre-K classrooms should in the future universal pre-K become mandated.
I have a quick question
Sure.
on that. If that were to happen, the current elementary schools, I think specifically probably Beaver Meadow and Broken Ground, would need some pretty expensive retrofitting.
Primarily to get the toilet rooms.
Because those would go, at Broken Ground, Millbrook, those would have to go into Millbrook.
Well,
But then you would, move 3, 4 up to
So,
where 5?
so Millbrook and Broken Ground are a great example because it shows not only the physical changes but the implications for the schools. So Millbrook is currently does have 2 pre-K classrooms. It's got kindergarten classrooms, 1st grade and 2nd grade, with the 2nd graders up on the upper floor. So one possible the assumption I was making is that if you move the 5th graders out of Broken Ground, the 2nd graders would move into Broken Ground, and then the 1st graders would move upstairs. So you'd have pre-K and K on the 1st floor, you'd have 1st grade on the 2nd floor. So, so I think that could happen because there are already small group rooms between the classrooms and at Millbrook. Those small group rooms would probably have to would be changed into toilet rooms. So there would be expense to make those, get the appropriate toilet rooms, changing rooms adjacent to the kindergarten, pre-K classrooms.
The only thing I'd say is Beaver Meadow does have bathrooms in the classrooms.
They do
They're
already?
Out in the corner,
Okay.
so that's kind of
Okay.
a plus.
And do the new schools have
No.
bathrooms?
Just in the kindergarten rooms, right?
Kindergarten and pre-K have bathrooms in the classrooms,
Mhm.
but 1 through 5 have the group multi-stall bathrooms in the hallways.
So if you use those those rooms that currently have bathrooms in them for pre-K and maybe a couple in kindergarten, that might not have as much.
I think there would still be some, if you can go back to either the Krista McAuliffe
Yeah, we can see it on
or
there.
or the Abbott Downing. So,
That layout? or
that layout is fine, yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm kind of thinking is that, my assumption was that you would have, right now, you have a pair of classrooms, and there's what we call a small group room in between every pair of classrooms. So that might be where, depending on how you, where you put the pre-K, presumably you put some pre-K in here and move the kindergarten out into the larger classroom area. But that gives you the potential to have toilet rooms adjacent to the kindergartens, because kindergarten kids should really have classrooms adjacent to their.
And what do we lose when we lose the small group rooms? Presumably we built those for a reason.
Yeah, and they're being used very heavily right now.
Yeah.
They're for the grade level classrooms, most of at those schools, at the Abbott Downing, Chris McAuliffe, and at Millbrook, those classrooms are being used for tutors, mentoring, special needs support. Almost every one of those, they were originally designed to be excess space for the classroom teachers to use, but in fact they're being used for support spaces for students and for special needs students.
And you were saying that they should have classroom level access to outdoors?
So that for the kindergarten and pre-K students,
Yeah.
they're required by code to be able to enter and exit without going up and down steps.
But they can go out of their classroom.
They could go through the hallway.
Okay, you said
yeah.
classroom access, so that's
I'm
what
sorry,
I'm trying to
yeah,
understand,
yeah, so
because Chris
you can-
McAuliffe, they would
Yeah, no, they
go
don't
down
need
2
doors.
flights.
Yeah, no, they don't need doors from
Okay.
their classrooms, but they can go through a corridor, but they have to be able to exit their building from right onto grade without going up and down stairs, up or downstairs. So
Any sense of the cost of these renovations?
Well, so obviously, we need to get into it, but one thing that I see as an advantage is if you look at the left side of the screen, the first floor, in the middle between the hallway, you see the light blue areas on the far left, they're back to back.
far left,
Okay,
far-
so those are
yeah,
right here.
there.
Those are the
Toilet rooms.
multi-stall boys and girls bathrooms there. So knowing that I have water and plumbing in those, I think, again, we're far away from this,
Yeah.
but if we were going to look at repositioning or relocating bathrooms, we have close access to water there, and we also have it on the other end of the hallway. Jack, with your cursor, you can, yep, nope, those are right there, yep. So, to answer your question, Pam, if that was on a far end of the building and it was a longer distance, that's going to escalate the price, but I think I could.
And it may be, depending on how many kindergarten classrooms are there, that
Right.
those serve as they are now, as the bathrooms for kindergartens.
They
That
do.
The kindergartens don't need the changing areas that the pre-K students need to have. And
Right.
part of it is just, they're little kids, and you don't want them walking, the teachers and the little children have to walk long distances to get to the bathroom, so they need to be adjacent or easily accessible from their classrooms. So these are just some of the kind of considerations and things that are going to have to be thought about. And that's kind of any other questions that you have, or anything that needs more clarity? Or I don't know if Kathleen has anything she wants to add at this point?
No, Laura, that was a great, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Laura, that was a great presentation. One of the things that
Also, we've been watching pretty closely is new construction in Concord. We've been watching some of the permits and for multiple dwellings, single homes, that kind of thing, developments basically. So we want to keep a close eye on that. That will begin to show itself over the next 12 months. So we just have to be sensitive to that. And also the housing market, we've been following that too. The housing market in Concord is what they consider by the real estate agents to be hot. So I know that homes are on the market for just a few days and they're sold. So we know that September, October will be really important for us for numbers. I think it will help. I think that the universal pre-K is really a difficult thing to really ascertain at this particular moment, but I think you did a great job at least giving everyone an idea about the impact of it. I think the board's decision is really going to be around, do we meet the needs that we have now as identified in the enrollment numbers, or do we do what the board did 10 years ago, and that was try to be visionary in the respect that you were able to encompass kindergarten without having to do any additions to your buildings. You just don't want to do that. And in some cases, like Krista, you can't even put an addition there because they're already on a postage stamp size lot. So just some of my thoughts right now. This was helpful though in terms of what each building looks like.
How accurate has Davis been so far? Because this is, a drop from where we were in 2019. If you look at the so were they, I don't know when the study was completed, so I don't know, were they on target for the next year? Or
Right before COVID.
Right before COVID.
COVID, so we don't know.
February of 19,
So we got it in February of 19. It's dated 18, so I was trying to get a sense if they were right in 19.
Pam, I've done the Nasdaq. I've done that every year for I can't tell you how long. And when I went back to look at the when I got the Nasdaq report, I checked on some of the information that was on the report, and they used obviously births to Concord mothers, and they in all the local hospitals, Manchester, Concord, in the area. But the one thing that I felt was missing was two factors actually. How many students are in out-of-district placements? Concord students are in out-of-district placements, and I don't mean placed by us. I mean choice, like private school, parochial school, that kind of thing, or charter school. And the other piece that I think is really important is the I just lost it. The housing starts. Usually NASDAQ will get information from the planning board, from the local planning boards, and use that as part of their formula for arriving at numbers. That's why I think we saw such a discrepancy with the NASDAQ numbers and the other report, is that they did not have the housing reports for new construction. So we want to go back. I would like to be able to go back and now, if you will, and begin to scratch at that a little bit more and ask NASDAQ if they would re-look at their numbers again. Because NASDAQ will actually do that for the school district as part of your membership fee. So you don't have to pay an extra amount of money to have that done on an annual basis, by the way. So we'll do that in August.
Okay. So we can come back to this. I did want to run through the schedule going forward. So I do have two schedules at the end of this presentation, and then after the schedules, if there are any other questions, we can come back to this. So I'm not sure if you can read that. I hope you can read your. So the top part is the grade configuration analysis. I've broken this out into grade configuration analysis, educational program review, partnership with Granite State Y, the existing building analysis, the site analysis and selection, and then developing preliminary plan options. So when we first started doing this, we were hopeful that we could make a lot of decisions by September and be able to move into developing some preliminary options in the fall. The goal of this study is really to give you enough information that you can submit your letter of interest to the New Hampshire Department of Education January 1st. And so this is kind of our ideal schedule. I think it's got some cushion built into it. So I think that there's some, with each of these things, we've particularly with the grade configuration analysis, I imagine with the partnership with the Y, and I imagine with the site analysis, you're going to want community input. And that really can't start till September. I believe it can't start till September simply because of people's vacations. So I think you're going to want to spend at least September and maybe even into early October getting input. So hopefully we'll have some more concrete information to present to the community by then, and be able to spend September and October, or at least September and the beginning of October, on the presentations. And even with that limited time, once we kind of have decisions about the site, the grade configuration, and the population, then we'll be able to do some preliminary concepts that will help you develop. We'll develop some budgets for you based on preliminary concept drawings. So really, by the ultimate goal is by the end of the year to have an understanding of what the budget, whatever directions, whatever choices are made, that you have an understanding of the size, the site, is the Y in, is the Y out, and a general sense of what the budget would be for a project going forward, so that you can present that to the state early in January, and that you have an understanding of that as you go forward. So that's our overall goal. And then in the next slide is just looking at the longer term, and I think I showed this to this group a couple of months ago, which is saying, if you're able to kind of get that submission into the state, the initial, and it's really just a letter of, here's what we're thinking about letter in January. The first big submission for the state is in July 22nd, where you really have to have a very well-defined plan, schematic design going forward, so that it can see much more precisely exactly what you're doing. And then once that's submitted, we have the architects. This includes actually an assumption that the final architects are selected by the beginning of the year. We then have the two big parts of the getting the bidding documents together: the design development, which really makes sure that everything is understood about the major systems in the design, and then the construction documents, which really put together every single detail that the contractor will need to build from, and the bidding. So that would take from August through for a year to do that documentation and bidding, which would allow you 2 years of construction. And if this schedule is adhered to, you'd be able to occupy the school in September of 2025. So this is the big picture, and that's why we're pushing now and trying to bring this information to you, so that you'll be able to make these decisions to go for these types of targets.
If we were looking, are there other options for universal pre-K, including potentially putting it on this site that we haven't found yet, but we're talking about, or allowing for an opportunity to build a citywide center
Absolutely.
later the fact? Because I do think if it ends up getting mandated, there may be funding for the construction of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think what we would have to do to our elementary school, the work, I think we need more numbers to understand
What the implications would be.
which is if trying to retrofit for pre-K is the fiscally best choice, or whether we should look at other options.
Yeah.
Pam, this is Kathleen. Pam, Londonderry did that when kindergarten they did not have kindergarten. They decided to do exactly what you just described. They built a separate facility specifically for kindergarten, rather than try to add on to each of the individual buildings and have to do all the renovations to include, access as well as, bathroom and all that. So Londonderry did that, so their pre-K and K are all located in one building. And they've been pretty successful with that with that concept.
I mean, having an early learning center is not uncommon. There are a lot of positive things about it, that you have all your services together, and everyone's on the same page in one building. The challenge is for parents who have other kids and have to go to, do they have to drop off their little ones at the
Yep.
early learning center and then go to a different elementary school, or put the child on a bus, or, so that's always the upside and downside of an early learning center.
Yeah,
But it's certainly feasible.
I'm just even thinking like at Krista McCullough, which I'm most familiar with, that playground is so tight. Like, how do you incorporate appropriate options for little kids without taking away the little space they have to kick a ball around or whatnot?
I think it's a good thing to be thinking about.
Do you know if there's any sort of, and it's impossible to say, but any educated guesses as to when that may come up?
I don't have
Preschool?
any insights into that.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you that the reading that I have, it's high on the list, because one of the problems that we're really struggling with is the lack of available and suitable care for pre-K kids, so that families, men and women, can get back to work. I mean, in Concord, we don't even have enough seats for children from Concord to attend Concord preschools, because there's just no seats. They really struggle tremendously with staffing also. So I think there's an appetite for it out there. Danielle, I don't know what the feds are going to do. I do know it's high on their list, but as you know, that's always going to be a tough sell.
Thank you.
So that's all I have this evening.
Thank you.
And, feel free as you look at this further. I'll continue to try and massage it and get it more specific. And we can do a little bit of an exercise on what the implications would be for the elementary schools if we actually were putting what the cost might be, what, as you say, your point is really well taken about the outdoor space as well as the indoor space. So we can do a little exploration on that and perhaps bring back some more information.
I also, Laura, want to be able to work with Paulette. We haven't finished the research to do the 5 through 8 or the 6 through 8, what the research tells us. We did have a conversation with Merrimack, who took the 5th grade out of elementary and created 5-6. But that's not quite exactly what we're looking at. But we'll have some research and some data around that for the board, because I think that's important in terms of not only for the board but for the general public, because I know people do get worried about 5th graders and 8th graders.
And I think the thing that we did when we were looking at this in 2017 was that it was really a 5th, 6th grade community and a 7th, 8th grade community that had some shared core facilities but with separate dining areas. So it really is a 5-6 school and a 7-8 school with a core cafeteria, kitchen and mechanical spaces, but almost two separate schools, which I think is the way that these types of buildings need to be for this kind of these populations.
So one of the things that came up in our hearings in June from some constituents at the meetings were a couple of items. One was, what was the cost to renovate? The second was, what would it cost to do a new building? And then, things like cost per square foot. Is there any way we can start to do that kind of work, even if it's just general, just ballpark, at least giving us, because I'm really nervous about, not nervous, but I want to be able to go out to the general public in September and with with some data, because I think that's what they want. I mean, no offense. They want to know how much it's gonna be.
Yeah, yeah.
What does that mean, my taxes, and you know that, you've heard that, Ruchi.
Absolutely.
Is there any way we
if-
can have some of that data?
If people are comfortable with this sense of 1,250 students for the 5 through 8 and 950 students in a 6 through 8, if that's approximately what we're aiming for, then I can start to do some very rough cost per square foot based on that.
I think that would be helpful. At least that's some of the message. I think, Pam, Danielle, you were there. I don't know who else is in the meeting. I'm trying to listen to voices. I think Brenda's there. You've all heard the messages at those 2 public meetings, and that was pretty clear that people wanted a little bit more of information like that. I know it's early on, and I don't want to scare people away, but I think we have to be upfront about it.
Absolutely. No, that's something we can do.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay, well,
And I'd even be curious to know what a 400-seat early learning center for Concord would be. I think it would be amazing. And that could be something that we could partner with the Y too. I think it would be a wonderful asset for the community. But maybe that's later.
There is one question out behind you, right before, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Dick Henry, and there's one curveball that we haven't talked about that I was just listening to on the radio, and we have an N of 1 on what's going on. But this was the first month that parents universally, whether they pay taxes or not, got $250 for kids above 5 years old and $300 below 5 years old on a monthly basis for I don't know how long. But they were just saying on the radio that this might be something that gave young people sort of the confidence to go ahead and start a family where they would just sort of feel like this is awfully expensive. And so I think that might be an unknown
Yeah.
that might contribute to population growth on the one hand, or taking kids out and putting them in a private setting on another hand, or saving that money. You can also get the money as a lump sum at the end of the tax year if you'd rather have it that way. So you could use it for summer camp or, music school or something like that. So I think it's just a real unknown.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that at all, but that's a
That might
really good
affect them.
point.
The other point they made that is, although this funding is related to the pandemic, to help parents with the pandemic, once you've got it out there, it's real hard to pull it back. And so if this becomes a reality in the future, that all young families have some form of funding to help with their kids, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Great point.
Anybody else have questions? Anything else that we need to talk about tonight that you know of, or?
No, I think, just to reemphasize that although we're nearing the end of July and we have August where, people are busy and all of that, that we really want to have those public forums to work on with, not obviously the community, but to take a deep look into elementary parents and maybe pre-elementary parents to get their input on what they feel about a 5 through 8 versus a 6 through 8. And I think maybe Kathleen said it earlier, but to talk through concerns with 5th graders with 8th graders and that kind of thing. I think hearing from the public would be a good thing, and I think that's part of this whole study. So I just want to kind of hammer that home, that that's what we'd be looking to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So probably something that we would want to schedule soon to get on a calendar in September.
I think so. I
For
think
people.
we've got our upcoming, August school board meeting. We
Yeah.
have executive committee, next week, so we should probably talk about that and put a placeholder date for the September, is what I'm thinking. or a couple.
And you do like one at each of the campuses? Or one at,
Yeah,
No
you know, we've done that
broken ground
before. I think it's something we should strategize on, how we can get the most input from the public and how we can make it easy and accessible for them to come and talk to us. So, yeah. I think anything's on the table for what we could look at doing.
Danielle, when I get back, Matt and I will sit down and lay out some ideas around that, because I do agree with Matt, it's critical that we do that.
Okay.
sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business from anybody tonight? Anybody like to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
You good?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, well, I think I want to tell you it stopped raining.